Okay, it looks like we are live now. Hello everybody. My name is Alaska Metropolitan. I'm a Second Life avatar, and I have a brand in Second Life called Alaska Metro, where I create... One second, I gotta mute this. Sorry about that. I have a brand where I create items for your avatar to wear, and that includes something called appliers. So if you don't know what an applier is, I'm going to show you that my avatar is actually wearing some right now. An applier is a texture layer that sits on top of your mesh body. So it is very similar to when you log in and you don't have a mesh body and you have a default Second Life avatar. It's very similar to the system layers that you would be wearing before, and it actually uses the same texture map. So if you've ever made an outfit for Second Life with your default avatar, using by uploading a texture and then applying it to pants or shirt or underwear or whatever, you can actually turn it into an applier for your mesh body. So if you're a creator, you don't have to throw out your old stuff anymore, which is awesome. And I'm just going to double check to see if anybody has joined us yet. And it doesn't look like anybody has at this point. I'm going to keep an eye on my live chat. And if I see any questions, or if you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask. I will be lagged. The longer the stream goes on for, the more lag it's going to get. So if I don't see your question or answer it right away, it's possibly I'm just lagged. So I'm actually standing here in a premium sandbox. I didn't really want to do this in my store or anything, so I'm here. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give myself a big platform up in the sky so that fewer people are likely to drop in on me and bother me. So I'm just going to make a plywood cube here, and it's going to be a giant platform for me. I'm just going to make it as big as a prim can go. That seems pretty big. And I don't like the plywood texture, so I'm going to apply a different one. There we go, now I just have a great platform base. So to get it up in the sky, all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the position on the Z coordinate. So I'm just going to put it up 600 meters. A note on platforms, you do not want to be above 1,000 if you're wearing a mesh body, because if you do that, it tends to break down a bit. It looks worse the higher you go, and that's just a Second Life limitation. So I'm going to fly up to my platform now. So I'll start to see it around 600. Come on, platform, where are you? It looks like we're actually suffering from some terrible lag on the live stream channel itself. I'm hoping that that will go away in a second. If it is stalled, please let me know in the live chat and I'll restart. Thank you. All right, where's my platform? There we go. So a couple of notes on what I'm doing here. I am wearing the Maitreya mesh body. I'm wearing the Lalatka new Simone bento head, and I'm wearing the Vista hands. So I just basically put together an avatar using Omega-friendly mesh items. And I don't like my lighting here, so I'm going to change that as well. So I just changed my wind light settings using Firestorm. This is just a quick access panel, so that's a lot nicer. That's nice and smooth. If I am severely lagged or if the stream has stopped working, Please, please, IM me in world so that I can reset it. Thank you. And if you just bear with me for a moment, I am actually going to sign in on YouTube so that I can follow along with the live chat there as well. Okay, it looks like we're installed. Good. I wasn't seeing anything happening on my end. Okay, great. Brigitte just let me know that that there are a couple of hiccups. It's a little jerky, but it's typical SL here, so that's good. I was not seeing anything happening on the live stream on my end, so I think my computer's just very it's suffering right now from all this. My graphics settings are actually turned down pretty low. I have my Firestorm preferences are down in my bottom toolbar. This is an option that you can customize your Firestorm preferences in this sort of quick toolbar thing. So if I click on that, it will automatically open to the graphics tab so I can make changes in here. And I find that my computer runs a lot better if I do not have advanced lighting model on. So that's what I've done. I've turned that off. If I turn that back on, of course I've got my shadows and everything is beautiful, but that's really not going to work with a live stream, I'm afraid. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to make an Omega applier. So like I mentioned before, I don't know if anybody was watching at that point, but an applier is basically a layer that you wear over your mesh body. It is a very tight fitting layer. So appliers are ideal in addition to being the basis for your skin or your makeup if you're wearing a mesh head. An applier is also useful for things that are designed to be tight. So in my case here, I'm kind of wearing jeggings and I got like a little crop top on, but typically you'll see appliers are things like lingerie, or they're tattoos, or they are stockings, or they are anything where it would be closely fitting to the body. So instead of wearing a fit mesh layer for that, you can, if you'd like, wear an applier instead. And one of the nice things about creating an applier is the UV map is exactly the same as the system layers, especially for Omega. That's the whole point of the Omega system, is that it's universal. So because of this, you can, if you are a creator and you've already made system clothes, you can convert them over to appliers. It's actually pretty easy. So what I'm going to do right now, I believe we're on time and it is noon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what our agenda is going to be like. I'm going to try to stick with it as best as I can. I know last time I ran a live stream, I went over by 2 hours. It happens. So this is going to be our agenda here. So it is currently noon, so I'm going to give you an overview. I also have a little slideshow that I can show you as well, and I will also offer these things as downloads on my website later, probably within 24 hours, along with a recording of this stream. So if you miss anything, don't worry, you can watch this later as well. So I'm going to give an overview of what Omega is. I kind of explained a little bit about that, but I will sort of talk about the mission statement behind it. I will go over what we need, and there's some resources, and all these resources are free, that we're going to use to make our applier. And then I will also talk about just the general steps on how do we make an applier. And then around 12:15 or so, yeah, I'm in Second Life's time zone. I'm actually in Vancouver, BC. So hello, you should come visit. BC is beautiful. So in my time at 12:15, we're going to start making a clothing texture in Photoshop. So what you're going to be seeing me do here is going to be an awful lot of messing around in Photoshop. So probably about 45 minutes of that. It's possible that some of the things I do in Photoshop will also be able to, you'll also be able to do them in GIMP with the Photoshop plugin that they have. I don't know, I'm not a GIMP user, but there may be equivalences. So if you're not using Photoshop and you are using software like GIMP, it's possible some of these techniques can be used in other software as well, hopefully. So I'm going to go over all of that, and hopefully that won't run too over time. And around 1 o'clock, I'm going to show you how to make an applier, which is, it sounds more daunting than it is. All you're going to do is get a UUID, which is a universal number ID. It's associated with all the game assets in Second Life. Everything, your inventory, objects, everything has one. and you're going to plug it into the Omega development kit and make an applier. And then if I don't run too over time, around 1:15, I would like to cover reskinning your plier, because I think this is where a lot of people who are creators mess up, especially with the Omega system, and they end up not configuring the buttons correctly. So if you are going to reskin your plier, meaning you don't want the default Omega logo on it, you want to have your own branding, there's easier ways to do that. So I'm going to go over that as well. So I'm still here on my platform that I've created. I'm just standing around. I have already plugged Omega into my Liletka head and my Vista hands, and I am wearing my Maitreya relay. It's actually here on the edge of my screen here. I usually just keep just the bottom of it touching. And you'll notice on my screen, I've got a lot of heads-up displays here. So I've got my Maitreya mesh body utilities HUD here. I also have my Liletka utilities HUD here. And I have my Vista hands HUD here as well. And I just like to keep these things on the edges of my screen as small as they can go, and I just leave them on permanently with my mesh avatar's body parts. And I just do that because even if you're wearing appliers that are universal like Omega, you still probably want to tweak some things, and the best way to do that is with the HUD that actually comes with your body or body part. And just to let you know, I am wearing the Simone Liletka bento head. This is a brand new head. It is bento, so that's actually a shape that I created that looks kind of like my avatar underneath. And she will work with Omega. None of the other Liletka heads will. So I think a couple people have been confused by this. There are two Simone heads. Only the bento one, the brand new one, will work with Omega. The older ones will not. But we're actually going to make a clothing applier today, not makeup. So it doesn't really matter, but I did want to show you that there's lots and lots and lots of stuff out there that works with the Omega system, including my Vista hands, my Maitreya mesh body, and my beautiful new Liletka head. I am thrilled with all these purchases. I love the Maitreya body. I also wear the Slink Physique and Hourglass bodies quite a bit. But those two, Slink and Maitreya, are my go-to for mesh bodies. They're both very widely supported. They're both very beautiful, and they're very easy to edit. I just purchased the Vista hands like yesterday, and I'm pretty thrilled with how they add movement to the avatar. So I'm just going to show you. That's really fun. If you go to the animation tab on the Vista HUD and click the random hand anim, just turn it on, you'll see that she starts to have sort of wiggly finger movements, and she kind of has like a natural movement to her hands, and it just adds so much realism to the avatar. And the Simone bento head has something very similar, where you'll see that she just kind of has a bit of a grin sometimes. She'll wink at you. She has a bit of a subtle facial movement that really makes a big difference with making your avatar lifelike. And I just love watching my hands wiggle right now. I'm just so thrilled by this. Okay, I got distracted talking about how much I love my mesh body parts, but if you haven't invested in it yet and you're still wearing your system avatar, I guarantee a couple days into wearing a demo and you'll never want to go back to your system avatar ever again. So I'm going to cover, in my overview, I'm going to show you just a little slideshow here. So we're going to cover what is Omega. Okay, so Omega does not make mesh bodies. There's no such thing as an Omega mesh body. There's no such thing as an Omega head. What there is Omega compatible mesh bodies made by creators like Maitreya, Vista, Liletka. And what the Omega system does is it is a universal applier system. So you as a creator make one applier, but it will work on all the mesh bodies that Omega is supported on. So what this does for the customer is if they buy the Maitreya mesh body, they also get a kit, which is actually a relay in the case of Maitreya, that allows them to use any Omega applier. They're all universal. They can use anything that is labeled as an Omega applier. And one of the main core principles of the Omega system is to be universal, it has to use the default second length UV map. So if there are bodies out there that are not Omega compatible, then the reason is probably that they're using their own UV map. And all a UV map is it's the texture area that wraps around your mesh and what that looks like and how that fits. So I'm also going to show you the Omega website because this is a great resource. So the URL is slpoweredbyomega.com. And you'll see that at the very beginning there's just their blog and recent posts and stuff. But if you go to supported meshes, this gives you an idea of how many things you can use in Omega Plier on. Let's just look at the ladies' full body meshes typical. I'm just going to expand that. Bam. It basically will work with everything. I think the only major and popular creator that is not Omega compatible for bodies is probably the Mesh project, and that's because they have their own proprietary system for their appliers. 1 second, I'm going to have a sip of water here. So what you need to do as a creator, if you are making appliers, is you need to have the Omega Dev Kit. And your customers have to install Omega on their body. Generally speaking, there are 3 types of Omega kits. There's a relay, and that's what I have here on my screen. This is the Maitreya relay right here. There is a plugin, which is an activator, which is just a HUD. You wear it, you wear your body part, you click the activator, and then it's installed forever. You never have to worry about it ever again. And there are drop-ins where, these are a little rarer now because they're a little more challenging, but you basically drop your mesh body part onto the ground and drop in a script and pick it back up, and then Omega will now work on it. So this is the heavy lifting that that the Omega system does for you and that the customers have to do on their end. So this is not, you may have to do a little bit of support to just encourage your customers to pick up the Omega kit. Now to make things a little easier, there is an Omega support group. It's called Omega Applier Systems-Support. It's a group in World, and everybody in there is super friendly. I'm a volunteer in there, and I like to help people in there. So if your customers are getting stuck, they can try asking in there, and we can troubleshoot for them. So let's go back to our slide here. And I also had a note here from Brigitte that Maitreya is not actually Omega compatible in the nails. That's true. It will apply, but it doesn't look very good because, like I mentioned before about universal UV maps, the Maitreya fingernails and toenails are not compatible with the UV map. They just do not work. So it applies, but it looks weird. So I'm going to go over, how do you make an Omega applier? Well, you need to be the texture creator, or you need to own a full perm texture kit. Okay, so this is I can't emphasize this enough. You can't just take an item that you bought in Second Life for your standard avatar and convert it over to an applier. That's not a thing you can do. You need to have uploaded the texture yourself, or you need to have full perms on the texture. And the Omega and Second Life terms of service do not allow you to use other people's textures without their permission. It's not good, don't do it. Your texture needs to fit the standard SLUV map. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. So it's the same as the classic avatar. It's the same thing you've been making all along. And you also need the Omega Dev Kits. This is 0 lindens in World or on the marketplace. I'm just going to pull it off the marketplace because I don't want to have to teleport all around while I'm doing this. It is 0 lindens. The kits themselves to install Omega on your body or to wear that relay, they range from between 50 lindens to 99 lindens. So it's a small purchase for you to have Omega working on your body forever and for your customers as well. All right, now we're into the texturing tips part. So I'm just going to quickly go over the resources that we're going to be using today. So we're going to be using 3 resources. The Omega Dev Kit, as I already mentioned, which we're going to get off of the marketplace. We're going to get some higher quality SL UV map. I don't like the ones that are provided on the wiki. They're low resolution, so we're actually going to get Robin Woods, which are excellent. And we're also going to get the Starlight Skins from Elo Elliott. And the only reason we're doing that is because if you have some skins, and Elo Elliott's Starlight Skins are they're full permission, they're open source, she released them for free, everybody can use them. The advantage of using her skins as a starting point for clothing is you kind of have some of the shading done for you already. And I personally use my own skins that I've converted over to a sort of a gray sort of bump map type thing when I'm doing my shading, but we're going to use Elo Elliott's because now you've got a starting point that you don't need to create everything from scratch. And then we're just going to go over how to make an applier. So the first step of this whole process is going to be making our texture. So to make our texture, we're going to get those resources. Now I've already downloaded them. under my assets folder here. And it's a good idea to keep your folders very organized, because if you're a creator, you're going to find that it's hard to find stuff if everything's everywhere all over your hard drive. And the other advantage to being very organized is it's easy to find previous works that you've done, and maybe you can pull some of the texture out of that, so you don't have to keep recreating everything from scratch every time. A lot of what I do is very modular. It's very, I edit in Photoshop in a non-destructive way, so I can reuse, because it takes so much time to draw everything from scratch every time. So the assets that I've already pulled are Robin Wood's UV maps. So this is what a standard SLUV map looks like. It's not great. It's never been great. We're locked into it now, but it's not ideal. Like, the seam on the head is around the top of the skull is weird, and you only get 1 foot, you only get 1 arm, so if you want something that's short sleeve on one side and longer on the other, forget it. It's not going to happen. You only get 1 arm, and then it's flipped. Same with the foot. You only get 1 foot, and then it's flipped. So you have to be symmetrical, which is kind of stupid. And the other thing I grabbed was Elo Elliott's skins, and if you're ever interested in creating skins, these are a great resource to start from, because she's already done a little bit of the shading and positioning of items for you. And she supplies layered Photoshop files, which is awesome. So I already grabbed these, but I'll tell you where to get them. So for the SLUV map, I just Googled Robin Wood SLUV, and Robin Wood is spelled exactly how you'd imagine, ROBINWOOD, SLUV, and she's probably the top hit. Yeah, so her website it's a little dated now. I don't think she's that active in Second Life anymore, but it's a fantastic resource. She also supplied a Photoshop file with the avatar already in there as a 3D object, which is extremely useful. So what she's done here is she's given us some UV maps that are layered Photoshop files, and they're also 1024 by 1024, and I'm going to talk to you for a second here about resolution, because resolution is one of the best parts of making an applier instead of making system clothing. The Second Life avatar, the default Second Life avatar, which I'm going to change into actually. Give me a second here. So there I am, and you can see the difference in smoothness between the mesh body I was just wearing and then the default avatar, or lumpatar as I like to call her. She only supports, the default system avatar only supports 512 by 512 textures. That's all you get. You can upload higher. You can upload at 1024 or even 2048. But when she bakes, which just means that the layers are on your avatar compressed and turned into a JPEG 2000, when she bakes, it's only going to be 512. So all your detail is lost. That doesn't happen with an applier. Appliers, the texture stays crisp because it's not baked. There are advantages to that, there's disadvantages to that. The advantage of that is that your texture will stay at 1024 by 1024, that's all I design in now. But the disadvantage is, because it's not baked, you have the alpha glitch happen when you wear more than 1 layer of appliers. And this happens a lot on mesh heads as well with your makeup. You can't really stack it, which is a little frustrating. So we're going to go over the SLUV, and I'm just going to open it up. So like I said, I just Googled Robin Wood SLUV, and I got the UV map that way. This is her download page. And what I did was I pulled the layered Photoshop PSD files here, and I just grabbed all of them. Obviously we're only going to be using one of these today. We're going to make a top. So what I want is the upper body template. And you can see how old this is. This is from 2005. This is when I joined Second Life, but it's still a fantastic resource today. So I'm just going to double click on that and open it in Photoshop. So I have the latest version of Creative Cloud. Photoshop, you might have a different version. Most of these things you should still be able to do. So you can see that this is a great resource. Like, she tells you where the system skirt lines up. There are color stripes guides to match things, and you can also get an idea of how distorted things actually are on this UV map. I mean, you've got some real problems if you're trying to do a top that goes in through this area here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I mean, those triangles are kind of going all over the place, and it gets especially messy when you're up in this area here on the top shoulders when you're dealing with straps. So straps are kind of a nightmare. this middle back part is kind of a nightmare. You might end up seeing your textures get a little distorted, and the best way to avoid that happening is just to avoid those problem areas, which you could kind of identify by, you know, where are these polygons going? They're kind of all over the place. So that gives you a helpful guide there. And you'll notice that this texture is 1024 by 1024, which is perfect. That's what we're going to design at. So my second resource that I got, and this was a little more challenging to get because Elo Elliott's website doesn't have the download link anymore, but these are the Starlight Skins by Elo Elliott. And like I mentioned, we're not going to make a skin today, but this is kind of helpful because like there's some shading already in here for you, so you can use that as a resource. And Elo Elliott's skins are fully open source. She lets you do any sort of customization that you want to them. And I actually originally, way back in the day, her skins were the starting point for my own skins, and I found it a really useful resource. So all I did was I searched Elo Elliott Starlight Skins, and I believe I got them off of the InWorld's website, where they are a download there. Yeah, I went to, sorry, Outworlds. I believe this is where I grabbed it. So this isn't, Outworlds is not Second Life, I don't believe. It might be an open source thing, I'm not sure, but they are here. I actually don't know that much about this. I just found the link on the website. So under skins, and there's also a link to Robin Woods there. And if you want to use Chip Midnight's skin templates, they're very similar to Robin's. They're just black and white, or rather black background, but they have the same level of detail. You can use those as well. So I believe I just grabbed it from here. So the download links are here on this website now. So it's actually, the URL is outworlds.com/download. So that's where I grabbed them for the purposes of this tutorial. If you're going to copy me, all you would need to do is the upper PSD, because all we're going to make today is a tube top. Super simple, super easy. So I grabbed this Starlight upper PSD file, and I've got that on my hard drive now. So we've already opened up the SL avatar top layers from Robin Woods. We've got our UV map here, and it should be pretty obvious where stuff is. Like there's the nipples, this is the neck here, these are arms, this is the top of the arm, that's sort of the underside of the arm, the palm is right here. And you'll notice that there's only one arm, really. It's flipped, so like I said, you can't really do something that's got one long sleeve, one short sleeve. It's got to be symmetrical when it comes to the arms. That's just the fact of the SL template, unfortunately. So what I'm going to do is I don't need these layers in my Photoshop file necessarily. I probably could have just grabbed the PNGs or something here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy a flattened version of this into a new document. So you know what, I'm going to give it a background too, because if I'm going to copy in Photoshop and there's transparency, it may not center it for me properly. So I'm just going to give it a white background. So to fill in Photoshop, you just hold down Control and then backspace. And if you want to fill your layer in your, that's to get the background color in. If you want to fill it with the foreground, which currently is, I was working on skins earlier, so it's kind of like a sort of a cinnamony color. It's Alt and backspace, at least on a Mac. I'm on a Mac here, so my keyboard shortcuts might not be exact. So I'm going to select all. I just hit Command A or Control A to select all. Then Command Shift C all at once. That copies a flattened version of whatever's on your current Photoshop file. If you want to hide a layer, it won't copy that, but it will copy everything else. I'm going to open a new document, which is Command N. And I want 1024 by 1024. I'm going to paste, and now I've got a flat UV map that I can use as reference. So I don't need this file anymore. I'm going to close it. I'm not going to save it. I want to maintain my layers. So the first thing I do, and this is important, but if you're anything like me, your computer's not that stable, so save, 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 save. Command Shift S is save as. So I'm going to go into my tutorials folder, I'll make a Plier creation, and I'm going to go into work in progress, and I'm just going to save it. I'm going to just call it a Mega Plier sample demo. I'll come up with a better name later. I'm saving it as a Photoshop file. Photoshop file will retain all of my layers here. So let's go with our upper texture from Elo Elliott. And I'm going to do the same thing here because I don't want the nails, do I? Let's take the nails out. Man, is there a better breast option? I think I like that one. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do Command A to select all, and then Command Shift C to copy everything that's visible as a flat image. I'm going to paste it back. I'm back into my my Photoshop file that I saved. I'm just going to paste it in there. Okay, so now what we have is we've got a layer that just has the Starlight Skin on it, and a layer that has our UV map on it. So far we don't really have that much, but we're going to have a tube top soon. So I'm going to just close out my Starlight Skin again. I'm not saving because I didn't do anything, and I'm not going to work on that file anyway. So notice that I'm not actually editing anything in the files, the Photoshop files that I downloaded. I'm not working directly on the Starlight Skin file. I'm not working directly on Robin Wood's UV map. I'm just sort of copying over just a flattened copy to use as a guide in my own file, and that's just to keep things more organized for me and to prevent me from hurting and making a change I didn't want to on like a resource that I may reuse. Okay, so the first step, the most important thing when we're making an applier is to get the seams to line up, and this is a challenge. This is like more than 50% of my work on making a really good like lingerie applier is just lining up the straps. It's so frustrating with this UV map. It really takes patience, and you're when you first work in this stuff, you're probably going to get really annoyed. And you just have to sort of have patience and test and test and test. And I'm going to show you how to test without having to upload files every time, because you don't want to have to do that. So let's go back to our sort of an overview of our texturing tips here. So we're going to start with the alpha. So alpha has a few different meanings when it comes to mesh bodies. As I'm sure you're aware, it's referred to as an alpha cut when you remove a section of your body to fit mesh clothing better. It also means the mask layer, or the mask option with the texture applier layer that's over top of your body. There's mask mode or blend mode. And in this case, what I mean is the base shape transparency of the applier that you're putting on. You can't just upload a flat image with no transparency to it, because it will just overlay your entire top, the entire area that an applier can go on. You don't want that. It's not going to look very good. So we're going to start with the alpha, and what that means is we're going to start with just a black and white, flat-looking texture that we're going to test to just really nail where those seams are and make sure that everything lines up. We're going to use local textures on our avatar to test. When I develop, I actually work on a dummy Maitreya body, but it's no longer available, so I don't really want to show you that because you'll just wish you had it, and she doesn't really give it out anymore. We're going to work at 1024 pixels. As I mentioned, appliers will support the higher resolution. There's no reason not to. I would not go higher than that because you don't want people to have to sit there and download your textures forever, but 1024 by 1024 is a good compromise between being high enough resolution to give you nice detail and also load quickly on the server. And we're going to keep a base shading map handy, okay? So what that means is we're going to start with, in this case, we're starting with the Starlight Skins from Elo Elliott. And you draw fabric folds over top of it, and you can reuse it as needed. So you never have to draw your shading over and over and over again. You can just start with shading you've already created. And this is the basic principle of non-destructive editing. Reuse. Make non-destructive changes to your colors and things, because then you can reuse them. You can drag those adjustment layers over to a new file, and now you've got the same color for both your top and your bottom. More texturing tips, like I said, non-destructive editing. We're going to use lots of layers. Your Photoshop files are going to get bloated and huge. You might need to buy an external hard drive. They end up getting the massive. I have a skin Photoshop file which is 0.5 gigabyte. You're going to use adjustment layers to create color variations. Like I mentioned, that makes it non-destructive. You can change them, you can tweak them, you can test. And we're going to save as either a transparent PNG, or we're going to save as a 32-bit Targa. TGA is a Targa file, with an alpha channel. And the alpha channel we're about to make, so we already have it. or we're going to already have it. Now, I usually just do transparent PNG because it's easier for me. I'm more familiar with working in PNGs because I'm a web designer in real life. But you want to be working with an alpha channel 32-bit Targa if you're doing a materials applier, which we're not doing today. I might do another tutorial later with it. But if you are doing materials, that alpha channel is crucial. It just does not work properly without it. And the materials in Second Life are kind of glitchy and hard to work with anyway. So that's not to say that they're impossible, just that if you're familiar with 3D software, you may think that it's an equivalent to what you're used to working with in 3D software, and it isn't. It's kind of its own thing. Okay, so let's get into this. We're going to dive into this. We're going to make the seam. We're going to make the alpha. So the alpha is just black and white. Black is off, white is on, and we're going to make a tube top. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower the opacity on my top layer, so I've got a kind of an idea of where's the skin, and the skin's got, Elo Elliott skins are pretty good at following where stuff is on the avatar. Where's the skin? Where's the UV map, right? So it's a good transparency where it's kind of like I can get an idea of where stuff is. Like there's the boobs, there's the neck, you know, here's the back, there's the shoulder blades. And I'm making a tube top, so I'm just going to ignore the hands and the arms. I don't need that right now, and I need to get this done fairly quickly, so I'm just going to ignore them. So I have about half an hour left on making this tube top, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can, and it may not be perfect. It absolutely will not be up to my usual standards, because honestly, it can take... I've spent up to a week on an applier before, and I know that sounds silly because it's just an applier, right? It's just an applier, but to really push the envelope on what can look good in Second Life, you kind of have to spend a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw my alpha right now. So I'm on a new transparent layer in Photoshop, and I'm just going to start. I'm using the Polygon Lasso tool. You can draw it freehand. I don't have a tablet. I'm actually using a mouse. I use a mouse for everything. Just a crappy, cheap Logitech mouse. That's literally all I use. So I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I'm just going to make a polygon shape, and it's not going to be awesome. It's just going to exist to give me an idea of where stuff is in the avatar. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of connecting the polygons that I can see in the UV map here. So I know where the seams are, and I'm kind of working in this yellow zone, which is a little bit hard to work with, but we'll see. And I'm just clicking to sort of form the polygons for my tube top, and I've decided that this is going to be my edge down here. And I'm just going to drag it straight across, and I'm going to finish my polygon shape. And notice I've gone kind of outside of the edges here a bit, because you can't guarantee with every mesh body that they're going to have the UV mapping be perfect, so you kind of want to give a little bit of wiggle room. And I'm just going to finish my shape and connect it, and I've got a little circle next to my Polygon Lasso tool, which just indicates that it will form a closed shape. So if I click that, I've now got the marching ants of the of our shape here, and I'm just going to fill it in. And if you recall, it was Alt backspace just to fill it in. Okay, so I've got the front part now. So this is obviously the breasts are the front part of the UV map, and I'm going to lower my opacity just so I can really see where did those end, where are those polygons. And now I'm going to go over, zoom out a bit. I'm going to go over and I'm going to connect it on the other side too. So I know that it's sort of like two larger subdivisions down. So I believe it will match up with this point right here. And I'm just going to go straight across. I'm holding down Shift to get a straight line. And now let's see where does it end. So it goes two major subdivisions down. I don't know if that's correct. I don't think it is. I think it's actually all the way down here. So I'm just going to click, and I'm holding down Shift to make a straight line, and I got my little circle to finish my selection. And I'm just going to fill it in again, Alt backspace to do solid white, which is my foreground color that I picked in my palette here. Command D will deselect if you need to do that. Okay, so my opacity is currently 62%. I'm going to bump that all the way up to 100. And I'm going to hit the D button on my keyboard. That's the keyboard shortcut to get the default the default colors, which is black and white, obviously. And I'm going to fill in, I created a new empty layer, and I'm going to fill that in solid black. Again, it's foreground color, Alt backspace fills it in solid black. So what do we have here? Well, this doesn't look like much yet, but this is the start of our tube top, okay? So I'm going to save, Command S, and I'm going to do a save as, Command Shift S, and I'm going to save it as a targa. So my format is going to be targa. It's going to end in .tga, and I'm going to keep this in a new folder. I just called it to upload. I'm going to leave the file name the same. Just make sure it ends in .tga. Photoshop has a tendency to rename your file extensions, which of course then it won't work. So I've got everything set up here, and I'm just going to click Save. Now under Targa Options, our options are 24 bits per pixel and 32 bits per pixel. For now, we just want 24. 32 is if we are already finished our wonderful tube top and we're going to upload with this alpha opacity layer in the channels part of the palette. We're not going to worry about that yet. We're just gonna nail these seams first. So we're going to do 24 bits per pixel. Click OK. All right. So somewhere on my hard drive, I've got a file here, which is our starting point. I'm going to go back into SL now. I'm going to close out these windows. Everybody needs to leave me alone. Goodbye. Okay, so this is my default Lumpatar, as I like to call her. She's got a nice black system outfit on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new top. So I'm going to go New Clothes, New Shirt. Now you're probably saying, why are we working with the system avatar? The reason we're working with the system avatar is it's the same UV map, so we can test these seams on it. If you have a development kit for a mesh body that includes a dummy, you can also use that. I didn't do it here because I don't know if anybody supplies them anymore. I have a bunch of old ones. I have one from my tray, I have one from Belize, I have one from Slink. As far as I know, they don't do it anymore. They don't give that body out anymore. So if you don't have it, this is probably your best way to test. You have two options actually. You can also go into the beta grid where it's free to upload, and you can test by creating an applier constantly and refreshing the texture inside it by uploading and changing the UUID. I think that's too much work, so I'd rather just stay on the main grid and test with a local texture. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I've got a Livestream folder here that I've created just for this, and I have a new shirt in here that I created. Just right-clicked, New Shirt, and I'm just going to name it Demo Shirt. I don't really care. I'm going to right-click and I'm going to add it. And this isn't going to look like anything yet. There we go. It's an ugly white thing. Right-click, Edit, Fabric. So I'm going to click on the fabric thing. So this is where your texture is going to live when you're creating a system outfit. And when it goes to pick the texture, you have options to pick something from your inventory and also pick something from local. So what does local mean? That's your hard drive. So you can actually not upload, but view stuff from your hard drive in SL without paying for the upload fee. And it will refresh automatically when you make changes to it. So this is basically how you develop a texture and test a texture before having to pay to upload it. So again, we're going into the local tab. I'm going to click the add button. I'm just going to find that on my hard drive. If you're on a Mac like me, it shows you recent places, so it's actually pretty easy to find stuff. So there's our tube top. Doesn't look like anything yet. You still have to select it here and click OK. And now you can see it's ugly and it's black and white. But what we can do is we can check our seams. So I just clicked Save. I'm going to close that out and close out my inventory. And I'm going to freeze my avatar. So Firestorm has built-in pose stand. I want my arms downward and my legs apart, and all I'm going to do is check my seams. So there's only one seam on this avatar, or on this tube top, which is on the sides. Well, I guess technically there's two seams. So you can see exactly where that is happening, where that seam is. So you can see because it's black and white, so it's high contrast, it's easy to look at, and this is going to be our alpha channel. And I just had a note here about I think I mentioned earlier about how alpha is used interchangeably to describe a bunch of different things in Second Life with mesh bodies particularly, including the cuts on your HUD to make your mesh clothing fit better, the mask/blend modes for your pliers, which we'll go into in a second or later, and it also refers to the channel on your texture which controls your transparency. So I just had a note from Immortal Beloved. It's opacity. That's really all it means. Alpha is just, is it transparent? Is it solid? Which is it? And an alpha channel is black and white. White is visible and black is transparent. So that's all we're making right now is our black and white alpha channel. So I'm looking at the sides here and I can see that it looks like the back needs to be moved up like maybe 1 pixel, and then it will look a lot better. And honestly, I can spend hours doing that, and I'm not going to because I need to get this done. So I'm just going to turn off my black background layer here, and that gives me an idea of where everything is in terms of the UV map. And I'm just going to double check which direction I have to nudge the back in, and I'm going to do that. So it looks like it has to go up. So in Photoshop, I just drew a marquee marching ants around the back, and I know this is the back because the boobs are in the front, so it's pretty easy to find the boobs. And I'm just going to hit the arrow key. I've got my move tool selected, which is this little plus sign here with the arrows. I'm going to hit my arrow key on my keyboard just once. Oh, it didn't work, sorry. I'm in the wrong layer. I gotta have the right layer selected. So I'm in my top layer with the white thing. And I'm just gonna hit my arrow key just once. And that nudged it up 1 pixel. It's probably impossible to see on the tiny little screen, but it did happen. Oh, it actually did nudge my selection on the black layer. Well, if I want to fill that in again, I just hit Alt backspace to fill it in solid black again. I'm going to save, Command S, and I'm going to save as, Command Shift S. In my to upload folder, I want a Targa. Make sure your format is set to Targa. Okay, double checking my file name is correct, and save. Now, when we go back into SL, it'll automatically have updated. That looks a lot better, doesn't it? It's not perfect, but that's pretty good. I think it's going to be pretty challenging to really know what that seam is there, especially if we put a seam line there so that it looks like that's where the stitching is. And if we have time, we'll do that. I have 20 minutes left on my agenda for doing the texturing part, so I need to really crank this out now. All right, so now we have an ugly black and white thing, but this is our starting point. And you'll notice that, it doesn't look great through the top here, like the breasts and so on, like this looks really chunky and bad. So we can spend a lot of time to smooth that out, but unfortunately, that's not time I have right now. I can maybe do a little bit of it so I can show you how I finesse this, but I'm going to spend maybe 2 minutes on this and then I'm going to do something else. So I'm going to turn off this black bottom layer. And I'm going to lower the opacity slightly on this so I can see the underlying UV structure. So I'm really using it very much as a guide. So I'm going to use my, my brush tool and my erase tool pretty interchangeably just to really smooth this out and make it look a lot better. So the brush tool keyboard shortcut is B, right click, and you can anywhere on there, and you can get an idea of your size and your hardness. You want your hardness to be 100% when you're working on a hard edge type thing like this, where basically it's the edge of the fabric that we're going to be creating. My size is way too big. Let's take that down and just click escape to get out of there. Wait, did that even work? No, didn't save my settings. Okay, click anywhere to get out of there. Command Z undoes, and I'm going to hit X, and that's just going to flip my foreground and background. I want to have white, right? Because I'm doing I'm going to be doing the excuse me. I'm going to be doing the white part of the alpha mask here. So what I want to do is I just want to, all right, X white is the foreground color. I'm just going to go in and, why is my opacity still 27? All right, opacity should be 100%. On my tool, and I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to kind of make this, smooth this out a bit, make it look a little bit more like an actual, like somebody's actually wearing it. And my eraser tool is E, right click, make sure your hardness is 100%. So I'm just kind of smoothing it out a little bit. I'm not spending too much time on this, like I said, because we have to get going on some other stuff here, so. So yeah, I'm just sort of freehanding this. If you have a tablet, I'm sure it's easier. I'm going to turn back on my black layer just so I can see how smooth that looks. It's not great, is it? Oh well. Again, I'm just using the brush tool. I know it doesn't look like 100% opacity here because I've got the layer turned down. I'm just sort of drawing over top and just trying to get a really smooth, nice looking edge to this. I'm holding down Shift and clicking to draw in a straight line. You don't have to do that if you've got a steadier hand than I do. And zooming out, it looks a little better, doesn't it? It's not even or anything, but that's about as much time as I want to spend on it. So my opacity is 70% on my top layer, the white, just because I was trying to look at the UV map underneath. I'm going to turn that back up to 100. And here's our finished alpha here. Again, I'm saving constantly. Command Shift S. It's going to get us into the save as mode, so I'm not destructively saving over top of my working file. I would not do that. And I'm making sure every time that I'm saving as a target. It's really easy to just click on this to get the same file name and then leave it accidentally as a Photoshop file. In fact, I probably do that about once a day, but don't be me. Save it properly. It needs to be a Targa. Save. Replace the existing file. Again, 24 for now. We're going to change it to 32 later. And let's check back on our file in Firestorm. It looks a little better, doesn't it? It's not great around this boob area. Not great at all, but well, it's probably good enough. For the purposes of the demonstration. You can spend a lot of time making this perfect. And I'm also going to edit my shirt and just make sure there's no, it's not puffy or anything. Okay, it's a tight shirt. Setting should be 0. Sorry about that, I got lots of IMs. I wish Second Life had a way to just not get group IMs at all, you know, just not have them show up when you're busy doing something. Alright, so we have the start of our shirt. It does not look like much yet, but it will in a minute or two. Once we get the shading in there, and you can see that the side seams look pretty good. They're actually pretty seamless. And a big part of that is working with a good detailed UV map, just like the Robin Wood or Chip Midnight ones. So, shading. Like I said, there's a shortcut to this. Don't reshade every single time. Create a very good guide, possibly using Elo's base here as an example, or in my case, I use my own skins. Create a good guide and just reuse it. Don't redo it every time. There's no point. So what I have here is, obviously, I have Elo's sort of shade map type thing. And I also have a note from, I believe it's Nele. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Neele, N-E-L-E. She just said that you can use the Second Life clothing previewer. That's really great software. I use that quite a bit too. Yes, please post the link for that as a resource as well. And I will, when I go back in on the recording on this live stream, I'll add the link there as well. So SLCP is Second Life Clothing Previewer. It's just software that runs on your computer and allows you to preview on the default Ruth avatar. So again, you don't need to upload. I'm just going to have a note here because I think we're pretty lagged and just let her know. I just let her know to post the link in the chat, so you should see that in the live chat if you're signed in. Okay. So we've got our skin here, but it's skin colored, and we're going to make a tube top, so we probably don't want it to be skin colored. In fact, I think what I'm going to make is I'm going to make a denim tube top. So my denim tube top, I probably want my shading to be kind of a gray blue. Oh no, not Ruth. Well, I don't know, I'm kind of Ruthy right now because I'm just wearing the default system avatar, but at least it's my shape, so she's not as fugly as she could be. Ruth is the default shape and avatar that everybody sort of starts off with, or used to back in my day. I'm a very old avatar. I've been in Second Life since 2005. And I actually heard of Second Life in 2003, and I didn't join it for 2 years because I thought it was too nerdy. And yet here I am. Okay, so let's take a look at making an adjustment to this to make it sort of a gray-blue color. I don't know if you can hear my cat in the background, but she's making herself known. Oh, apparently the live chat doesn't allow you to post a link. If you Google SLCP, Second Life Clothing Previewer software, you should be able to find a download link. So I'm going to go into I'm going to make an adjustment layer. So what an adjustment layer is in Photoshop is it is a non-destructive way to edit your layers. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that. So this is the adjustment layer button, and it just has like a little black and white sort of circle. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to do hue saturation. Okay, so this allows me to drag it and kind of get a different color here. So that looks kind of jean-like, but it's too saturated, so let's desaturate it a bit. There we go. All right, apparently people could hear my kitty. My cat's name is Godiva. She's a black rescue Siamese cross cat, and I have two, and the other one has a much worse meow. So it's very Siamese sounding. So be fortunate you heard the cute one, not the really loud one. Okay, so what I did to apply that adjustment layer only to my Starlight skin layer was I just I held down Alt and then I clicked in between the two layers. So what that does is it only applies your adjustment layer to that single layer. This is especially useful if you're doing something like adding some shading, darkening something, and I also think that this needs to be a little darker. So I'm going to put in another adjustment layer called Levels, and I'm just going to drag it to be a little darker here. Well, it's looking a little more denim-y, isn't it? I like that. Okay. So it still doesn't look like anything. All we've done is modify the Starlight skin. So the next step is going to be to make it transparent. So right now I'm going to do it as a PNG. I'm not going to bother with the alpha channel. That's a little bit more advanced for this tutorial. I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm just going to turn on that top layer that we did to sort of nail the seams here. And I'm just going to hold down, in my case, Command, in your case, probably Control. I'm just going to hold down Control and I'm just going to click on that layer on that little thumbnail. And all I did was just select it. I'm going to turn that layer off. I'm going to go back down to my Starlight layer. And I'm just going to click the mask mode. So what the mask mode is it just says Add Layer Mask. I click on that, and now it's applied that transparency. And I'm going to turn off the layers in below. So I've got my UV map, I'm going to turn that off. And I got my background, which is just a white layer. I'm going to turn that off. And now you have the Start Tier 2 top. So I'm going to save this, Command S, and I'm going to save for web. You don't have to do this way. You can also just save as PNG, but this is easiest. So Command Alt Shift S is save for web. I know I work as a web developer and designer, so I'm really used to using this all the time. If you can't remember that, just go File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. It may also be under Save for Web in the main file menu. So we have presets here under the Save for Web thing. You want PNG 24 and you want to turn on the transparency so you can see the difference that that's making. Let's turn on the transparency. Make sure we're still 1024 by 1024. Let's click Save. I'm going to get back into my to upload folder. And it's no longer a Targa, we're now working with a PNG. So Omega Plier Sample Demo, PNG. Click Save. I'm going to go back into Firestorm, and it's not going to have updated on my, oh, thank you for posting that, Shelly. It's not going to update on my avatar because it's a different texture, it's a PNG. So I'm just going to right click and edit my demo shirt, and I'm going to pull another local texture here. And this one is going to be our PNG, so this is the transparent one. Click OK, save. Okay, it's still not perfect, obviously. This just looks like you painted your skin. That could be fun if you wanted to do some body paint or something. I think that could be fun. But you can see that it is applying that shape that we have already created for our alpha. And I am seeing a little bit of a white halo underneath. This is a problem when you're saving 1024 by 1024 PNGs. It doesn't really show up on an applier. It might on the system avatar. If it drives you crazy or if it's ugly, you can save back down to 512 for your system layer. if you are making system layers, or you can just go ahead and make it a targa with a alpha channel. And this is the issue I keep running into with materials. You can't really work with PNGs and materials. It does this haloing thing all the time. It drives me crazy. The other thing you can probably do is just give it a blue background as well so that it matches. And I'm going to do that right now. So I just used my color picker tool, and again, Alt backspace fills in your background with your foreground color. So what would make this look more like a tube top? Right now it looks a little bit like body paint. There's a couple things we can do here. We can give it some shading. We can give it some fabric folds. We can give it an edge along the top. We can do a few things here. And one of the things we definitely probably want to do, and I do this in and I do this in all of my appliers, is give it a realistic seam on the sides, especially because it's kind of a trick. It will hide where it doesn't quite line up with the UV. If there's already a seam there, it's a little less obvious that it doesn't quite line up. And of course we can do our best to make it perfectly line up, and we will. But one of the so I'm just going to close that out. But one of the things about mesh bodies and the variety of them out there, and the fact that it's a universal Plier system with a universal UV map, you can't guarantee that every single mesh body is going to interpret that UV map exactly the same. You may see that it doesn't quite line up. So putting an actual real looking seam there is a great way around this. Okay, so I got my body paint and it's kind of ugly, so I'm just going to quickly add some shadows into this. So I'm going to go back into my Photoshop. I'm going to turn off my adjustment layers, and I'm going to create a new layer on top of it. And there's a few different methods for this. I don't have a bulletproof method. Somebody had just asked if this live stream tutorial is being recorded. It absolutely is. YouTube will automatically put it onto my main channel, which is available at youtube.com/Alaska Metro-SL. It will probably be there within 24 hours. So I'm just going to go back to my defaults here. I've got black and white as my settings for my brush colors. So I just hit D to get my defaults, so black and white. I'm going to hit X to reverse them, so now I've got white in here. And I'm just going to, these are going to be folds. So I'm just going with my brush tool. And now I'm going to go in with my smudge tool. Unfortunately, there is no keyboard shortcut for this anymore. There used to be. I use this tool all the time, so I don't know why they got rid of it. And I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to smudge these a bit. So all I'm doing is clicking, dragging, wiggling. And that's going to give me some sort of highlights that kind of look like folds in clothing, maybe. Let's add another little one. And maybe another one up here. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is just for a tutorial. Okay. So I'm just wiggling, click, drag, wiggle, and that gives me something here that I can... Okay, so we're going to lower the opacity on this. There's a couple different things you can do too. You can try using overlay. Overlay might look better. I'm zooming out. Okay, it looks a little bit more like folds. I'm going to do a couple more in the back too. Same method, so it's a new layer that I've got here. If you're being, if you're not strapped for time, you can go in and like really finesse these and make them great. And you can also name your layers, which I don't know why I'm not doing, but I just want to get this out the door so that I can show you how I create a sort of a denim texture to go in here as well. If you really want to make your layers look, your folds look sharp, just take the erase tool and erase underneath them. Now it looks a little bit more realistic. Again, I'm just using the smudge tool and I'm just dragging and wiggling. This isn't great. This is not up to my usual standards, but it's something. And I can also do another layer for darkness. So I'm going to take my brush tool and I'm going to hit X to get back to black as the foreground color, and I'm just gonna put in some shading here. I can also use the blur tool in here as well, to sort of blur those out a bit. So like I said, this isn't that realistic at this point, but I don't really care. If you're following along, you can obviously do a lot more work on this than I am. So yeah, just smudging, clicking, dragging. Let's get our blur tool back in there. It's kind of like painting happy little trees, except they're happy little folds. The layer is way too dark though. I'm gonna see if overlay looks good. Okay, that looks like something. So I'm gonna turn off my background layer. I'm gonna do Command Alt Shift S to get my save for web. My keyboard shortcuts will not be exactly the same as yours. I'm actually using a PC keyboard on a Mac. That's the only way I work now. I can't stand the Mac peripherals, so I've got PC stuff but a Mac machine. So my keyboard is not labeled exactly the same as it should be, so I don't know exactly what the keyboard commands are supposed to be here, but I know where they are on the keyboard. So I've got Omega Plier sample demo. Again, I'm saving as a PNG transparency, just for now. Click Save. Replacing my existing folder. I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to do a just double check on this. I feel like these folds are just way too dark, or too high contrast right now, but we can go back in and just tweak those a bit. Make them a little bit more subtle. How about that? That looks a little bit more like something. Depending on how much texture and how much the denim pattern is going to knock this back, we may end up wanting to do a may want to end up making these higher in terms of contrast and more contrast overall, but we'll see. It just depends on how much that overlay sort of desaturates everything and how much it flattens it. So again, Command Alt Shift S, save for web, PNG transparency, save, and I'm just replacing my same file again. And because I'm using a local texture, it shows up automatically on my default lump of tar here. Alright, I'm happy with those. I think those look great. Okay, so we kind of have a start here. This is starting to look like something. It still looks a little flat and painted on, but it still looks like it is looking like it's fabric because of those folds now. They're kind of stretching where one would have stretchiness. And our next step is going to be getting a denim texture and putting that over top. And back in my texturing tips, Applier Creations Basics slideshow, I have a slide here which is just on how to ethically source textures. So when you're creating an applier that is when you're basing it on photo source or photographic element, you need to ensure that you have the rights to use that photograph. Because even though, and I am not a copyright lawyer, I only know the basics of this, but if you are working with an image that you did not create, you might be infringing upon intellectual property. Now, I don't think you can copyright a pair of black dress pants, for example, because that's not copyrightable. Anybody can make that. But the photograph of them can be copyrighted because it's a photographic work. It's a piece of art. It has intellectual property associated with it. So even though, you can make a case that a designer in real life who creates apparel can't copyright their pattern or their design, the photographs of it can be. So you want to make sure that you're doing this ethically and properly. So you have a few different options for sourcing your textures. You can pay for stock images or textures and check the license associated with them. This is what I do. I actually share my my accounts between work and Second Life for a lot of subscription-based stock photo websites. So I need to subscribe to these sites anyway for work. So I can also access them for myself. I probably should buy 2 licenses for that, but whatever. You can use Creative Commons, reuse allowed images. If it's something where you're supposed to give credit, which is the case on, I think, on freepik.com, you should probably try to give credit. Sometimes I throw it in a note card if I'm, in the case of, I believe I made some space pants that used the NASA images, so I put the credit in the note card with the item. You can use open source or public domain images. I did this for a skirt that I created last year for On9. The theme was botanicals, so I used vintage botanical illustrations. They're old enough that they're in the public domain. And if you're in doubt, don't use it. Because if you're just creating a fabric texture, I mean, seriously, just put your jeans on the scanner and scan them. Like, just take an iPhone photo. For the glitter on a lot of my fingernails, it's just an iPhone picture. I just put some glitter nail polish on, took a photo, and used that. You know, so there's a lot of different ways that you can get images to use. So we're going to do a denim sort of overlay to make this look more like a denim tube top. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use an image from Wikipedia, and Wikipedia has a searchable database called Wikimedia Commons, I believe. And you want to double check every image, but a lot of the stuff in here is free for use, even commercial use. So I'm just going to search for denim. No, there's not really anything great in there. What I'm looking for, I'm going to look under Denim Textures. I think I saw something in here. I'm looking for an image like this because I can take an image like this and I can make it seamless and repeat it and turn it into an overlay that makes the fabric look real. And my best candidate in this case is probably either this image here, Denim Texture 01, or jeans stoff.jpg, because they both have the most area to work with. So, excuse me, I think I'm going to work with Denim Texture 01. I'm just going to double check. This has a Creative Commons license on it. And I'm just going to double check that commercial is allowed, and it does say you're free to use even commercially. I believe you are supposed to give credit. It's hard to do that. Sometimes I'll just put it in like the promo, the like ad for the item on the website, or yeah, or in a note card. I also wanted to share, keeping in mind how to ethically source textures, I would like to point out that the website that used to be called cgtextures.com, and this really threw a lot of people for a loop when they found this out. It's now called textures.com. Their license specifically bans use in Second Life, unfortunately, and it is in their frequently asked questions. Can I use your textures in Second Life? No. I point this out because this website, which used to be called cgtextures.com, is now called textures.com, was kind of like the go-to before 2013 to get images for games and Second Life, and unfortunately we're no longer allowed to use it, and I actually end up pulling some things from my store because I used it before I read this, unfortunately, and it is all due to the Linden Lab terms of service. They claim that they own images on the asset server, so that directly conflicts with their own terms of service, which is unfortunate because this website is a great resource. It had a lot of great images, high resolution, some of them were already tiled for you, and it was all free. Unfortunately, you can't use it in Second Life. Okay, so I've got my denim texture here. I'm just going to download this. I'm going to take a couple seconds here. I'll show it in my Finder, and I'm going to put it under my assets, under my tutorial Omega Plier creation. So I'm just doing my best here to stay as organized as I possibly can, especially because the way when I create, I try to be as modular as possible, and I try not to redo stuff. So I'm going to double click to open this. We can't just throw this on here right now. That's not going to work. It's not going to look very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it into a seaming repeating pattern that we can tile over top. And the best way to do that, and I am running over time here, so I'm going to try to be as quick with this as possible. I'm just going to sort of crop in sort of a shape that looks like it's fairly even in terms of highlighting. You don't want to get a fold in there, you don't want to get a dark edge in there. Maybe a little bit less. I'm going to crop that in. I'm going to get it to around the size where it's going to need to be for the finished tube top. So right now this is being viewed at 12.5% because that image was very, very high resolution. We don't want that. We probably want it to be maybe around 100 pixels wide. So I'm going to go back to my denim texture here and I'm just going to resize it. So I hit Command Option or Alt I to get the image size menu. And I'm going to go into my width and height and I'm going to go with 100 pixels. I'm going to click OK. This doesn't look like anything, but it's because I need to zoom in. Okay, so what do we have so far? We have kind of a denim texture, sort of. But we can't just repeat this. It's not going to be repeatable. So we won't tile. So what we're going to do is we're going to go Filter, Distort, Shear. We want to say that the undefined areas are going to wrap around, and we're just going to drag these 2 points and make sure that they both line up exactly on the edge. And all that did was put our seam in the middle instead of on the sides. I'm going to take my... This is way too low resolution. I can't work with this. I'm going to go into my history palette. I'm not going to resize it that small. So Command Option or Alt I is to get your image resizing, and I'm not going to go 100 pixels. That was way too small, so I'm going to go 250 this time. Okay, that looks a little better. And there's some discussion in the chat right now about like the ethics of what people use for image sourcing. But yeah, I definitely wanted to bring it up. Like I said, I'm not a copyright lawyer. I don't know that much about this. I just know, like, you know, the basics for me to feel okay about what I do and feel fairly secure that I'm doing the right thing. But it is important to be at least aware of these things. And the other advantage to really like working with hand drawing your own textures or scanning things, photographing things, is your stuff's unique if you really make it yourself. And yeah, like I said, I primarily work with stock photography and stuff I shoot myself, so I don't really do the Wikipedia thing that often. You might want to double check to see about the credits on that. Okay, so I'm going to do that distortion again. So distort, shear, edges wrap around, drag the corners to the edge, there. So now our seam's in the middle. This is actually a pretty decent texture to work with because it's hard to see the seam. I hit S to get the stamp option, so I'm just going to clone let's get a hard edge on that, or harder edge on that. I'm just going to clone sections of this over to just sort of get rid of that seam. So I hold down Alt to select my source, and then I click to just clone it out. And I kind of try to click around to get different sources here. And yeah, it's a little harder to see that there's a seam there. So it's now it now does not have a seam on the edges on the left and right, but it does still on the top and bottom. So we need to repeat this again. So what we're going to do is go Image Rotation, 90 degrees clockwise, and Filter, Shear. We're just going to do it again. And now you can see that the seam is a little bit more visible. So there's a few different methods to get rid of this. I'm not spending that much time. I'm just going to clone out stuff, but you can also just sort of copy and paste bits of the texture over itself. You can blend it. There's a few different things you can do. I don't really like how dark it got in the middle, so I'm going to try to source from something lighter here. Okay, so because I rotated the image 90 degrees, it doesn't look like denim, or it doesn't follow the pattern that denim would anymore, so I got to rotate it back. So 90 degrees counterclockwise. I'm gonna zoom out. Does this look like it's about the right size for this? I think it's still a little bit too high resolution, so I'm going to resize it down. I'm going to go with 175 pixels. Okay, so we got a denim texture now. So I'm going to copy and paste it into my document. And I'm just going to repeat it. I'm holding Alt and Shift to drag it, and then it will snap to the seam. And then I'm just going to duplicate, or I'm going to take these layers, I'm going to merge them, Command E, just do that again, and that lets me build up a copy of it really easily. I guess I didn't really have to do the top and bottom, but... So I just merged all those, so now I got my texture on the go here. So how do we get this texture to work with this sort of underlying shading that we already have? Well, there's a couple different ways to do this. One of them is to put this as an adjustment layer over top of your base. Another might be to put your shading over top of this texture, which works if you've got it in grayscale actually, so maybe we should do that. Yeah, let's do that. So I turned on all my layers except for my top alpha and my denim, and I selected all, so Command A, and Command Shift C copies everything. Command V will paste it obviously, and I'm going to convert this to grayscale. I'm just going to go image, oh sorry, edit, no it is an image. Yeah, sorry, image adjustments desaturate. I usually use adjustment layers for this, but I'm not going to in this case because I already have a backup of all my shading down here. So I'm going to turn all these layers off. One of the things I need to do is this layer of our denim does not have the same mask that we want to use. So I'm going to actually drag it over. I'm going to click on the black and white mask that we've already made for our shading. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to drag it up and it'll apply to that layer. Okay, so now we've got our denim shape, or a denim on our alpha shape. I'm going to click to get the grayscale layer. I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click between the two layers to apply it only to that layer, and now I'm just going to do an overlay to see how that looks. Not bad, actually. Like, that's got some shading to it. It is not nearly high enough contrast, though. So I'm going to bump up the contrast on this. Again, I would normally do this with adjustment layers, but I'm kind of running out of time here, so. So I'm just sort of dragging around the levels until I get something that I like. I kind of like that. I think it's a little highly saturated, but I can just adjust that with the hue saturation. Take the saturation down a little bit, go back to my layers, and just hold down Alt to apply it to only that layer. I hit Command S, and I'm going to hit Command Alt Shift S to save for web again. I'm just going to double check it in World. Again, I'm saving as a transparent PNG at this point. Replace it. Go back into Firestorm. Yeah, we got a denim thing going on here. I think this texture actually looks terrible, but it's okay for what we're doing. It really had to be much lower in size, I think. I think it's just too big. It feels really meaty and pixely right now. I wonder if I can bring it down in size a little bit. So in order to make a change to your texture without affecting its alpha mask, just uncheck this little link thing. Command T to resize. So I hit Command T to do the transform on it, and I'm just going to see if I can size it down a little bit. Not really. All right, well, it's just going to be a very toothy denim. It really should have been lower resolution. Or not lower resolution, but like a smaller pattern. Okay, I'm kind of running out of time here, so I think we need to start making this into an applier. So to make this into an applier, what we're going to do is we're going to save the file and upload it to, so this is where you're going to pay your 10 lindens. And you're going to then collect its UUID, which is its unique identifier for the texture. and you're going to put it in the Omega Dev Kit. Now I'm going to see if I have any slides to discuss on this. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get the Omega Dev Kit. In my case, I'm just going to buy it off the marketplace because I don't really want to teleport anywhere right now. And when you unpack it, there's a bunch of different kits inside it. You want the standard Applier kit for pretty much anything you're doing. There's also a tinting Applier kit and a materials Applier kit. We're not going to do any of that right now. And then you're going to ensure that you have the correct kit for your Applier. So there's lower, upper, combo, there's makeup, there's skins. There's a whole bunch of different things you can make with Omega. In our case, we just want an upper clothing layer. You're going to get your UUID, and then you're just going to open up the script and follow the directions. It's that simple. People make it sound way harder than it is, and I'm probably doing that too. And then you're just going to, the last step, which is extremely important, check your permissions. Check the permissions on your Applier. It should only be copyable. You don't want people to look at your scripts. You don't want people to be able to see your UUID. You've got to make sure that the permissions are changed for the next person if you're going to sell your texture, if you're going to sell your Applier. So let's go back in and let's turn this into an Applier. So I'm just going to upload my image, as rough and awful as it is right now. Normally what I would do is, if I was actually going to create this as an item for sale, what I would do is I would add seams, I would add like edges to things, I would add a little bit more shading. I would really try to make this more than just a crappy denim tube top, but this is something at least that we can start with. So I've got my my textures now uploaded in my textures folder. That's where they show up. So I had to pay 10 lindens to upload that. If you want to save your lindens, do what I do and only use local textures or go to the beta grid. And then you only have to upload when you're at the very final stage. So we're not quite there yet because we still have to, and I'm going to turn off my pose stand. I'm still reset. There. I am going to go and I'm going to get my dev kit. So I'm just going to go in the marketplace. I think Omega Dev Kit will find it. There we are, Omega System Dev Kit. Okay, so there's actually a few dev kits from Omega, including the kit for if you're a mesh creator. You don't want that. So it's 0 lindens. Like I said, you pay to get the installer or the relay for your mesh body, and so do your customers, but the dev kit itself is free. So this should include everything you need to make clothing, skins, eyes, and nails for Omega System mesh bodies. Like I mentioned before, Omega does not make bodies. They make the plugin that allows you to use any Omega Applier on them. And I need to sign in because I'm not even signed in here. And I'm going to hide my screen so you guys can't guess my password. It helps if I type it correctly. How's everybody doing? If you have any questions or anything, I am trying to keep an eye on the chat. I know it is lagging a bit behind, so I might not answer your question immediately. Okay, I'm signed in. I'm just going to buy it now. It's 0 lindens. This page is evil because I always see stuff I want. No shopping today. Need to focus. Okay, I got my Omega System Dev Kit. So it should appear in your received items if you're bought off the marketplace. Okay, I gotta drag this out to unpack it, so let's do that. Alright, click open. Here's all the goodies. So you'll see that there are actually more than one Applier kit here. We only need the standard, but you do get all of them in the kit. So if you do want to experiment with materials or tinting, you can. We're going to copy that to our inventory. I already have 1 million copies of this thing already, but I'm just going to pick that back up. So it came unpacked in a folder called L&L Omega Applier Dev Kit. So we're not done unpacking yet. We also need the standard appliers. So I'm just going to drag out that to unpack it. Open. And there's a note, beginner, use this one. 99.9% of the time you will be using this one, even if you're not a beginner. So I don't think there are very many people out there who are making materials appliers. I will probably do another live stream tutorial on that. It depends on how much time I have. And let's just take that. Okay, Omega Advanced Standard Applier Kit. Beginner, use this one. Okay, what's in here? There's so much stuff in here. Okay, this is daunting, this is confusing. Actually, it isn't. They're pretty well labeled, okay? So you can probably ignore the compact ones for what we're doing today. You can do Omega eyes, which are for mesh eyes. You can do the face. You can do lower body, nipple, upper body, compact cosmetics, a bunch of compact upper and lower, more cosmetics, an entire outfits. This is if you have a top and bottom that go together. Yes, Shelley, I still use the pie menu. I'm not an advanced user of Firestorm by any means, and I also have my own sort of quirks with how I use things. And one of those things is, unfortunately, you probably noticed in Photoshop, I don't actually know what any of the tools are called. I just know what the keyboard shortcuts are for them. I don't even know how to access them otherwise. And there's also a skin applier in here. But what are we concerned with? We're making a tube top. We want the upper. Okay, so we're going to drag that out. Okay, so what is this? It is a box. It says top bra and upper tat. So what does this do? When this is attached as a heads-up display, it will apply depending on where you click on this button. It will apply to the top layer, the bra layer, or the upper tat layer. And I really want to emphasize that you need to keep this intact because not all the bodies have all the layers, and it is a universal system. It has to work with bodies that might not be the same as Maitreya or Slink or some of the bigger brands, and that might mean that there is no upper tat layer. That might mean that there is no bra layer. That might mean that there's no top layer. That might mean there's only one layer. But if you keep these buttons intact, it will work on all the bodies. So you definitely need to do that. Don't think that you're going to make an Omega applier and only use the clothing layer or the bra layer. And that's also not fair to your customers. You know, what if they want to layer something? What if they have a tattoo they don't want to remove? So it's really important that you keep these buttons intact. And I was going to cover reskinning your applier and how to correctly do that, but I don't think I've got time, unfortunately. I will probably do a follow-up. So I'm going to right click and I'm just going to open up my applier. Oh, sorry, my mistake. I wanted to edit it. And Shelley's making fun of me for using the pie menu. So one of the things that we want to leave alone is this description. It says 105, 155. What does that mean? That's actually the coordinates where these buttons are. And don't touch it unless you're reskinning it, okay? And we're not going to reskin it today. So don't touch these. Leave the description alone. Otherwise, the buttons aren't going to work properly. And like I said, that's not fair to your customers. So one of the things I'm going to do, now that I've rezzed this out from my dev kit, is I'm going to rename it. I'm going to rename this so that it's branded with me, except I don't want to take credit for this tube top because it's terrible. So I'm just going to call it Omega Demo Tube Top. Call it something descriptive. Put your brand in there. Give it something so that your customers are going to be able to find this, especially if you're not reskinning it. Because if you're not reskinning it, they're going to have 100 of these things in their inventory that all look the same. And that is one of the reasons I would recommend, if you are going to reskin, add a little picture. Show people what's in it. Okay, so we've renamed it. We've left the description alone. We've gone into the Content tab, and you'll see that there's two scripts in here. What do these do? Well, the one that's labeled No Modify, you're going to leave alone, except you're going to change the permissions on it. Go to Properties and just uncheck Transfer. Now, the config, this is where the magic happens, okay? This is where you're going to put your UUID. So double-click it and open it up. What do you see here? You see some instructions in the comments, and 99% of people who are having problems, that's not a really precise statistic, but people who are having problems with this, it's because they didn't read the directions. And there are instructions online on the slpoweredbyomega.com website. And I will show you those to you as well. Kit instructions. Dev kit instructions. It's exactly where you think it would be. Okay. So there's a bunch of different sections in here for all the different types of appliers. We're only creating standard appliers. There's a tutorial video. There's an overview of the different applier things that you can use. We're literally just using the upper. And then here's your instructions, okay? So it looks more daunting than it actually is. All we need to do is pay attention to line 7 in the config code. That is it. We're just going to paste in a UUID and then we're done. Wasn't that easy? So here's our texture. We've already uploaded it. We're going to right click, copy asset UUID. That's all you have to do to get your UUID. Okay? So now we're going to highlight where all these zeros are, and I'm going to leave the little quotes intact. Okay? So all we're doing is pasting in between the two quotes, Command V to paste. There's our UUID. And we're going to save it. You're going to get a notice in local chat that your texture has been loaded in there. This is going to happen whenever you change that UUID. So if you are testing and you don't love it and you need to make a change, you can go in and change that UUID and it will update for you automatically. You don't need to reset your script. On the Omega Plier config file that you just saved your UUID into, you're going to go into Properties and you're just going to turn off these permissions. You really need to change this. This is super important. If you're going to distribute this or give this to anybody or even a friend, you don't want them to see your UUID. This allows them to have access to your textures and your hard work, or your crappy work in my case of this tube top. So I'm going to close this out. Just make sure that your texture or that your permissions are correct in the object too. You just want it to be copyable. Close it out, and I'm just going to take my object. So it probably threw it back into the dev kit box, but you would want to put it somewhere else. Yeah, okay, Omega Demo Tube Top. It ended up back into the dev kit box, but I'm going to drag it over to the Livestream folder. And I'm going to change my avatar's outfit again. I'm going to be pretty again. Give me a second to load up here. As I mentioned before, I have a million things on my screen at all times. That's just the nature of loving your meshy bits. And I just want to point out again, this is recorded, so if you want to follow along and you want to make your own awful looking tube top, you can do that. And I will also release the agenda and the slides that I created, and I will also release that Photoshop file if you want it. I don't know how useful it will be, but I can definitely release all of those things for you. So let's test it now. We've got our Omega Demo Tube Top Applier. I'm double clicking it. What that's going to do is it's going to have it as a heads up display on my screen. And what layer do I want to wear this on? What am I currently wearing? I currently have clothes on, so let's replace my floral top, which is way better looking than my tube top. We're going to replace it with our tube top. So I'm clicking on the top button. You don't have to care about which of these buttons you're going to touch if you're wearing Maitreya, and I think this is one of the big reasons why people get confused about how necessary splitting these 3 buttons up is, because Maitreya is an anomaly. The other bodies don't work this way. On Maitreya, when you click anywhere, it asks you which layer to apply to. The other bodies don't do this. The other bodies, it will only apply to what you click on, so it's really important to keep these 3 buttons intact. In this case, I just clicked on top, and I'm going to apply it to my clothing. There we go. Look at that, our beautiful tube top. And you'll notice that the denim texture actually does look a little bit better on the mesh body, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's higher resolution. It's 1024 by 1024. And just that stuff in general looks nicer on a mesh body. You'll see that I've got a hard edge here. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that is about, and then I'm probably going to call the live stream over. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to detach my applier because it's done, it's applied, I don't need to keep wearing it. The reason we're seeing a hard edge here is because I have mask mode on. So remember we were talking about, like, there's a lot of different meanings for the word alpha, or different applications of it when you're talking about a mesh body. In the layers tab for Maitreya anyway, it's mask mode versus blend mode. And all that does is give it a hard edge. And the reason I turned it on today was because my hair was clipping through it. So this is the alpha glitch. If you've got two transparent textures in Second Life, and in any video game really, they will clip. It doesn't know which one's closer to the camera, so it kind of glitches. So to fix that, you just turn on mask mode. And one of the reasons I mentioned this for Applier creation is you kind of want to make sure your Applier looks good when mask mode is on. And I found this recently. I had created some beautifully detailed lingerie that was Applier lingerie for the event Anybody. You should check it out because there's tons of Applier clothing there for all your mesh bodies. I think everything supports Omega or is fit mesh there. And when it was set to mask mode in some of the bodies, it ended up being, it didn't look good because the sheerness was 50%, and some bodies it interpreted that as solid, which was what I wanted, and some of them it just disappeared, the fabric disappeared. It only showed me the straps, so that wasn't working out for me. So what I ended up having to do is go back in and change the opacity of my sheer texture to make it something that would actually mask properly, not just on Maitreya, but on all the bodies. So if you are an Applier creator, you might want to consider, at the very least, grabbing a few demos, and especially if you're going to be making Omega Appliers, because it is a universal system and not all the bodies are the same. So at the very least, grab some demos that will allow you to put Omega in there and test. If you can't afford to buy 1 million bodies like I have, I think I've got 6 of them now, don't worry, just get some demos that already have Omega installed, and there are some bodies that have that. I think Tonic is already in, Shelly can correct me here, I think Tonic is already installed, I think eBody is already installed, and Signature is as well, so you can try your stuff on those without actually owning the full version. So you'll see, like, what does mask mode do to your Appliers when you use it? You can see you know, where's the UV map hitting? Like, are your straps lining up on these different bodies? Because you need to be aware of more than just Maitreya when you're creating an Omega Applier. I know it is the most popular body, but a lot of people are stuck with only Appliers because no one makes fit mesh for their body, and they love their body and they don't want to give it up. So the more Appliers out there, I think the better, and the more stuff we have to buy, the better. So yeah. So I hope that was helpful. I apologize for going over time and how terrible this top looks, but it's a starting point and it will help you if you want to create things. And if, oh, a note from Shelly, on Signature, only the Alice body has it. That's the one I have the demo of that I use for testing, so that's why I thought all of them had it. But yes, Gianni and Alice have Signature, or from Signature have Omega already installed, so you don't need a kit to test on their demos. What I'm probably going to do next for a live stream is the other popular request was to do photoshopping an ad. So full disclosure, like, I do not really Photoshop my ads very much. I usually work with advanced lighting and mess around with lights in World. And really, I'm only doing touch-ups on my ads. So I'm not the best person to do a demo of that. I see some advertisements that are just stunning, and either they have a way better computer than I do, or they're photoshopping the hell out of them. I don't really do that. So what I might do instead of doing ads is I might do a quick demo of how I Photoshop an ad, which is really just bumping up the contrast and maybe fixing some stray polygons. And what I might then do is a live stream. Maybe I'll do a picture pile up from Flickr. So then I can show you some more Photoshop stuff. And there are tons of tutorials out there in Photoshop. There are lots of things that are free. There's a lot of things that are paid, like lynda.com and Creative Live. And it's really, like, Photoshop is one of the best transferable skills you can get. And it's made my life so much better and so much easier that I could become really good in Photoshop simply because I started doing texture mapping at a really young age for The Sims, and then eventually Second Life. And it became a transferable skill. I use Photoshop in my job now. I work with it every day. So, all right. So thank you everybody for watching. This will be recorded, and you'll be able to see it on my main channel at youtube.com/alaskametro-sl. I want to thank everybody for watching, and thank you for Shelly Lynn Bailey for creating the Omega system, which allows us to easily create appliers for any mesh body that's supported.